You remember that we had discussed 3 tests to determine whether a proceeding is a judicial proceeding or not, which is Section 1 says that Indian Evidence Act would apply to judicial proceedings in or before a court. But merely knowing and determining that a proceeding is a judicial proceeding may not be sufficient to come to a conclusion whether Indian Evidence Act would have application or not to those proceedings. This seems to be a little conundrum. What conundrum? That Indian Evidence Act applies to judicial proceedings in or before a court. So the first part of this proposition, this sentence, that Indian Evidence Act applies to judicial proceedings, was taken up yesterday. But merely because a proceeding is judicial proceeding, the Indian Evidence Act would have automatic application is not an easy question with a ready answer. And why this is so? Because there may be cases where the statute itself creating the body, that entity, that tribunal, that quasi-judicial body excludes application of Indian Evidence Act. Proceeding is judicial, but application of Indian Evidence Act has been excluded. Excluded by the statute itself, which has created that body. But this exclusion of application of Indian Evidence Act would not convert the nature of proceeding from judicial to something else, that it's merely administrative and not judicial. It would still remain a judicial proceeding. Because such bodies may decide jural relationship, or what we call lists, between the parties on the basis of evidence adduced before such body or such tribunal. Such body, such tribunal may not be bound by the rules of Indian Evidence Act. In spite of proceedings before such bodies, in spite of proceedings in these entities and bodies being judicial proceedings, they may not be bound by the rules of Indian Evidence Act, in spite of deciding what I call jural relationship or deciding lists between the parties. For example, let me now give you examples to clear this. Labor court, or the industrial tribunal that is constituted under the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947. Industrial Disputes Act of 1947 constitutes core of labor law, both academic and functional, and in your next semesters you would be studying labor law in detail as a core subject. So labor court has a suffix court, and labor court certainly decides less. It certainly decides jural relationship between parties, a workman and the employer. For example, so doesn't this make application of Indian Evidence Act to proceedings before the labor court automatic, that the proceedings are judicial in nature and it's labor court? And you find that in section 1 it's said that judicial proceedings before any court or in any court would be governed by Indian Evidence Act. It's not that easy. If you look at the scheme of Indian Industrial Disputes Act of 1947, you would find that the labor court or the industrial tribunals are not bound by the rules of evidence as contained in the Indian Evidence Act. Indian Evidence Act has been specifically excluded from its operation. And you can refer to lot of decisions are there on this question. You can refer to this 1979 decision, Shankar Chakravarti versus Britannia Biscuits, AIR 1979, Supreme Court 1652. Shankar Chakravarti versus Britannia Biscuits, AIR 1979, Supreme Court 1652. Where the Supreme Court said that it may not be bound by the rules of evidence. It's not bound by the rules of evidence. But it's nonetheless a quasi-judicial tribunal and the proceedings are judicial proceedings. So even this much, that the proceeding is judicial and the entity carries a suffix court, may not be sufficient to jump to a conclusion that Indian Evidence Act would be applicable. Now, why Indian Evidence Act is not applicable? Because it was so decided by the makers of that law. There is no other reason. Because the arguments that are being proffered for exclusion of Indian Evidence Act from these proceedings are not very tenable arguments. What does the Indian Evidence Act do? The Indian Evidence Act neatly draws the boundaries and determines the rules of the game that the two parties play. So what's wrong if the game is played in accordance with the rules? This is exactly what the Indian Evidence Act does. And what is the effect of exclusion of Indian Evidence Act from the purview of the Industrial Disputes Act of 1947? That the parties are free to choose what rule is convenient for them. Meaning thereby, facts which are not admissible under the Indian Evidence Act may be admissible before a labor court because admissibility, the question of admissibility would not be governed by the strict rules of Indian Evidence Act. This is the effect. So not much literature available on the rationale of this exclusion. Though there are two schools, one which supports this exclusion and the other which argues that no, Indian Evidence Act should be applied to industrial tribunals as well and to all judicial proceedings before any tribunal for that matter. And the only book that elaborately deals with this issue separately is Vepa Sarthi's Law of Evidence, which has a separate appendix titled Application of Indian Evidence Act to Industrial Tribunals. And the conclusion that has been drawn by the learned author is that there is no reason that why Indian Evidence Act should not be applied to industrial tribunal or proceedings before the labor courts and industrial tribunals. And I have no reason to disagree with that conclusion. And if you read that, you would be fairly convinced. It's true that such kind of tribunals, they dispense the so-called swift justice, faster justice. But it has been argued in that chapter that application of Indian Evidence Act is not going to hinder dispensation of so-called swift and faster justice. Rather, that would bar the parties from introducing extraneous facts, which seems to be possible. And there is another aspect to this question, to this issue. Though these tribunals, including the labor court and industrial tribunals, are not bound by the Indian Evidence Act. They are not bound. They largely follow. They follow. They informally follow. Because following those rules of the Indian Evidence Act helps them in keeping the extraneous facts away from consideration. So if they are informally following, why not make it a formal procedure? Make it a formal procedure. Make it formal that they would be following the rules of Indian Evidence Act. This is again the submission of the learned author. Same is the case with the Commission of Inquiry constituted under the Commission of Inquiry Act of 1952. You may remember yesterday I have told you that merely because some entity, some body is headed by a judge, either sitting or retired, it doesn't become a court, or the proceeding doesn't become a judicial proceeding. What proceedings are judicial proceedings have to be determined by applying those three tests cumulatively. This is what I had argued in the last class. Now, very interesting question arose before the Supreme Court in a 2014 decision, reported as Subramaniam Swamy versus Arun Shourie, both very well-known figures. And reported as AIR 2012, Supreme Court 3020. AIR 2012, Supreme Court 3020. The question was that whether a sitting judge of the Supreme Court, who is appointed as the chairperson of the commission, constituted under the 1952 Act, carries with him all the powers and jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. This was the question. And the Supreme Court very categorically said no. Because such a judge, even if he is a sitting judge of the Supreme Court, when appointed to an inquiry commission, only performs a statutory function. And it further said that the commission, so constituted, has powers of a civil court for limited purposes. These are judicial proceedings. These may be judicial proceedings. Within the meaning of section 193 and 228 of Indian Penal Code. Indian Penal, you may refer to section 193 and 228 of Indian Penal Code. But the Supreme Court said that these are judicial proceedings for this limited purpose. But it is not a court. A commission so constituted is not a court. And making the inquiry or determination of facts by the commission is not of judicial character. Now that complicates the matter. How does it complicate the matter? It complicates the matter because it seems to be a contradictory statement. Supreme Court saying that these are judicial proceedings. In the same breath, it also says that making the inquiry or determination of facts by the commission is not of judicial character. But I can't help. Same is the case with the administrative tribunals as well. Central Administrative Tribunal, CAT. CAT determines lists. It decides jural relationship. It decides legal disputes, not disputes of personal nature. Legal disputes. But if you look at the statute that creates CAT, you'd find that neither the provisions of CPC of 1908 nor the provisions of Indian Evidence Act are applicable to proceedings before CAT. They're not. Why they're not? Because they have been expressly excluded. There's express exclusion. And contrary to that, look at the functioning of the Election Commission, which decides election disputes. And for your convenience, you can refer to this 1965 decision, Jagdev Singh versus Pratap Singh. Jagdev Singh versus Pratap Singh, yeah. AIR 1965, Supreme Court, 183. Jagdev Singh versus Pratap Singh, AIR 1965, Supreme Court, 183, where the Supreme Court said that some proceedings relating to election offences under the Representation of People Act of 1951 are quasi-criminal in nature, and the Indian Evidence Act is made applicable under section 87 clause 2 of this act. Which act? Of this 1951 act. And these proceedings are judicial proceedings. not all the proceedings before the Election Commission. So what I said should be understood in this way, that Indian Evidence Act applies to all the judicial proceedings before the courts or in the court, but merely because a proceeding is judicial in nature, or it's a judicial proceeding before the entity, before the body created under a special legislation, a special statute, you cannot arrive at a conclusion, automatic conclusion, that Indian Evidence Act would be governing those proceedings. You need to refer to the statute creating that body. It would be very dangerous to give opinion, legal otherwise, about application of Indian Evidence Act without referring to. Because merely that it's court like labor court, or it's court like family court, which is constituted in the Family Courts Act. It would be governed, it would be bound by the rules of evidence as contained in the Indian Evidence Act, is not a correct proposition unless and until you refer to these provisions, that whether they have express exclusion or express inclusion of these provisions contained in the Indian Evidence Act. As I gave you this reference to this 1965 decision of the Supreme Court in Jagdev Singh versus Pratap Singh, where Section 87, Clause 2 of the Act of 1951 makes the Indian Evidence Act applicable. So will it be apt to say that the Indian Evidence Act is applicable to all proceedings of a criminal nature? Okay, this is a question that has been asked. There are other questions as well. So what was the legislative intent behind excluding Evidence Act from Industrial Disputes Act? Not only behind excluding the Evidence Act from Industrial Disputes Act, but also from other tribunals that may be deciding lists, that may be deciding jural relationship, was certainly that they should not be bound by these technical rules. Rules are technical, no doubt. But don't these rules draw neat boundaries? They do draw neat boundaries. And isn't that a reason sufficient to apply these rules to proceedings before these tribunals? My answer would be yes. The real reason that seems to be behind this exclusionary policy is that many such tribunals are not headed by legal minds, those who are trained in law. They are not legal minds in the strict sense of the term, not trained in law. And therefore, they may not be understanding the nuances of the Indian Evidence Act and as a matter of convenience, what they did, that they excluded the application of Indian Evidence Act in the name of speedier justice. Speedier justice. So coming to the next question that has been asked here in the chat box. So would it be apt to say that the Indian Evidence Act is applicable to all judicial proceedings of a criminal nature? Judicial proceedings of a criminal nature, yes. Judicial proceedings of a civil nature, yes. But merely that it's a judicial proceeding before an entity created under a special statute is not a sufficient ground to arrive at a conclusion that the Indian Evidence Act would be applicable. And as I said, and I suggest and I submit that whenever such questions arise, it's always safer to refer to the statute in question and then answer. It's not a bad thing that you would not be forthcoming with an answer, that whether Indian Evidence Act applies to proceeding before this tribunal, that tribunal. If you ask me, I may not be able to answer because I would take my time and I would either refer to a decided case by the Supreme Court, plenty of cases vis-a-vis tribunals and commissions, or if there are no decisions on that particular tribunal or commission, I would be referring to the statute which created that tribunal or the commission. And then only I would be able to answer. And that's the correct approach. So I'm not saying that you need to remain aloof of all this. Of course, you are supposed to know the decided cases and also about the question of application of these provisions of Indian Evidence Act to proceedings before certain quasi-judicial bodies or so-called courts like Labour Court and Family Court or Consumer Court. But it's better to refer to. Let me give you an example. And this relates to the first question that I had taken up. Question was that whether the bodies created in the JJ Act of 2015 they are bound to follow the rules of evidence as contained in the Indian Evidence Act. I said yes. Yes, they are bound to. Because nowhere in the scheme of Indian Evidence Act and nowhere in the JJ Act of 2015 it said that the Indian Evidence Act would not apply. So in such a situation, you rely on Section 1's language and inquire whether the proceeding is judicial and whether the body is a court or not. If the answer to these questions cumulatively is an affirmative, you can say that yes. And then I know that the JJBs and the Children's Court, they strictly apply the provisions of Indian Evidence Act to their proceedings and they have no discretion to exclude application of Indian Evidence Act from application to proceedings before them. Jiddu. So yes, if the proceeding is judicial in nature before the criminal court, Indian Evidence Act would apply. It would apply, but not to the affidavit as we have seen in section 1 that affidavits are not governed by the Indian Evidence Act. Let me see, but wouldn't it we have to state that since Indian Evidence Act has clean boundaries, it would be much easier for all to apply equally. Didn't I say the same? So why did you start with this but wouldn't it be apt to state that since Indian Evidence Act has clean boundaries, it would be much easier for all to apply and follow? Yes, this is exactly the argument of proponents of that school which want the Indian Evidence Act to apply to all the proceedings before industrial tribunals and other tribunals as well. But as I already said that these tribunals may be staffed by people who are not trained in the Indian Evidence Act. So for the sake of convenience, in the name of making determination of disputes and deciding lists swifter, they have kept these outside of the purview of Indian Evidence Act, which I don't support, which I don't approve. Now, another very important controversial part of the same provision, section 1, where a reference is made to several acts that apply to the three services of the Army Act, the Navy Act, the Air Force Act. And the question that arises is that what are those court-martial proceedings to which the Indian Evidence Act applies? If it doesn't apply to court-martial proceedings under these acts which have been enumerated, for your reference again, to refresh your memory again, let me read what we had in section 1, what we have in section 1. Section 1 says that it applies to all judicial proceedings in or before any court, excluding court-martial other than court-martials convened under Army Act, Naval Discipline Act, or the Indian Navy Discipline Act of 1934, or the Air Force Act, but not the affidavits. Except this Indian Navy Discipline Act of 1934, you would find that the other legislations mentioned in this part of section 1 are essentially English legislations passed by the British Parliament, English Parliament, and extended to the British Indian territories. They were extended to the British Indian territory. But after India gained independence and absolute sovereignty these legislations have become obsolete. Court martials are not convened under these legislations. There is no possibility. So why should we be concerned whether court martial proceedings under these legislations would be governed by Indian Evidence Act or not? In fact, this section requires a formal amendment in as much as the Army Act of 1881 was repealed in its application to India by the British Statutes Application to India Repealing Act of 1960. Similarly, the Indian Navy Discipline Act of 1934, when it was adapted by the Adaptation of Laws Order of 1950, ceased to refer to the English Naval Discipline Act. The current legislation that occupy the field are the Navy Act of 1957, which in section 186 repealed the earlier law. The Air Force Act of 1917 has also been repealed in its application to India by the British Statutes Application to India Repealing Act of 1960. The Law Commission has twice recommended that this part of section 1 should be omitted because it doesn't make any sense. It noted that section 133 of the Army Act of 1950, which is currently in vogue, section 132 of the Air Force Act of 1950 and section 130 of the Navy Act of 1957 apply the provisions of the Indian Evidence Act subject to the provisions of these acts, which further necessitates an amendment in section 1 of Indian Evidence Act to bring clarity about its application. In its 185th report, the Law Commission again recommended that this part of section 1 should be omitted. It should be omitted. In fact, if you refer to section 152 of the Army Act of 1950, 152 of Army Act of 1950, it categorically says that the proceedings are judicial proceedings. And certainly the other provisions that I referred to makes application of Indian Evidence Act to court martials convened under these legislations possible. With this, I end today's discussion.